Hey everyone, we're going to continue on with our trigonometry lessons. And what we're going to do is now use these trig ratios to find the lengths of missing sides. So what I'm going to do here is just do a quick little reminder with the mnemonic device. So, tewa. Okay, and let's just remember that sine is the opposite side of the hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent side of the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite of the adjacent. So what we're doing today is we are finding the missing side, and we're gonna round that to the nearest tenth. Okay, so our first problem here, when we're looking at it, if we want to find the missing side here, first we need to know what angle we're going off of. This one's pretty easy, or these are very easy because we're basing everything off of this angle right here. Okay. Now, when we know our angle, we can start labeling our sides. We always know that the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. Okay. The side directly across from the angle is the opposite side. And that leaves the other side touching the angle, the adjacent side. Okay. So we have an angle, we have this side, we don't know it, we have the opposite side, and we have the adjacent side. We don't know the length of the hypotenuse. We could find it if we want to, but we're not doing that right now. So when we have the opposite and adjacent side, if you refer back to your trig ratios, you remember if you have opposite and adjacent, there it is. So we're going to use tangent in our calculator. So very simply, we're going to use this angle measure and say tangent of 27 degrees is the opposite x over 10. And then it becomes a very simple case of cross multiplying. And then if you can recall, this is actually over 1. So what happens is when you cross multiply, you get tan 27 times 10 equals 1 times x, which is just x. You'll actually type it like that in your calculator. So I'm going to do that here. And you get 5.095, so on, equals x. And we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so this is 5.1. So x here equals 5.1. Okay? So just setting it up and then cross multiplying to solve for your number. So moving on to number 2, it's kind of the same thing. So except the degrees change there. So you might want to go ahead and set that one up. You already know that this is going to be tan 25. This is opposite. I'm going to start abbreviating. And adjacent, x over 10, cross multiply. And it's actually a little bit better to write it like that, so that you know where your, what's the coefficient and what's your angle. It makes it just a little easier. So you can do 10 times tangent of 25. And when you do that, you get 4.66 equals x. And again, round up to 4.7. All right. So this one's a little different. The angle is still starting in this spot here, but we're going to label our sides a little differently. Remember, the side straight across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. Okay. This side directly across from the angle is the opposite side. And the other side that's making up the angle is the adjacent. Now, this is not always going to be the case. This could be turned. It could be like this, and the 39 could have been here. You'd still have the opposite side here. It would have just been rotated. Okay, so just be mindful of that. So what happens is, what sides do we have? We have adjacent and the hypotenuse. So if you come back to your little reference, you won't have to remember this, but adjacent and hypotenuse, that's going to be cosine. So we come back here, and we set up, start setting up cosine. So the cosine of an angle, that simply means angle, is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Therefore, the cosine of 39 degrees is x over 7. Oop. Sorry about that. And when you cross multiply, you get 7 times the cosine of 39, which equals x. And when you do that, you get 7 times cosine of 39, typing in my calculator, you get 5.44, which will just be 5.4. So let's look at one that might be set up a little bit differently, and definitely one that causes a little bit more confusion because of the algebra behind it. So basically, if you write this one down, here's my angle. Still in the same spot, but now it's going to be a little bit different. Hopefully we can see that this is the opposite side now very quickly, and the side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. Okay, so opposite and hypotenuse is going to end up being sine. You won't have to remember that, but just know how to reference it. Okay. All right, so, I'm going to have sine of an angle equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the sine of 46 equals 8 over x. And so the biggest mistake here is that when people cross multiply, they think it's just like before, and that we're going to have sine times 8 here. But you have to remember that if you were to when you cross multiply this, okay, this is what happens. That sine is really over 1, and when you cross multiply, you actually get x times sine 46 equals 1 times 8, which is going to be 8. So there's actually an extra step you have to do here. You actually have to go in and divide this by sine of 46. So that these simplify, and x becomes, do this in my calculator here, sine of 46, 11.12, which is just going to be 11.1. Now, if you see the pattern, you can see anytime that the x ends up in the denominator, these two pieces right here, what happened to them from this step to this step? All they did was that replaced itself and they switched. So instead of it being, when you cross multiply, that you actually cross multiply, instead of it just being x times 1 is x and 10 times that is that number, on this one you actually have to go through the motions and divide in by sine 46. I want to show you a couple more that will have the angles kind of different, or the triangles in different orientations. So look at this one right here. So now you have, I'll switch back to my blue. You have this angle here. And now the right angle is a little bit different of a spot, but we know always that the side opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. The side directly across from the angle is the opposite. And the other side touching the angle is the adjacent. So we have this x side and the adjacent side, opposite and adjacent, that's tangent. And so then it is still the same way to solve, but what's different is your orientation of your triangle. So make sure you know how to label your triangle right and set it up. And this is a very basic one. Cross multiply, you have tans over 1, so you end up with 20 times tangent of 72. Oops, sorry, that's a bad 7 there. Equals x. And when all that's said and done, you get 61.55 equals x, which means x is, round this up, 61.6. So it's the same kind of thing here. If you start with your angle right here, you know, the side directly opposite of the right angle is the hypotenuse. This side directly across from the angle is opposite. And then this is the adjacent. So we have adjacent and hypotenuse, A and H. That's going to be cosine. Okay. Cosine of an angle is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So you get cosine 54. And adjacent side is x over 12. You know, cross multiply here. 1 times x is x. 12 times cosine of 54. And when you do that in your calculator, you come up with 7.05 equals x. That 5 is going to make this round up. So it's 7.1. And that's it. That's how you find sides with trig ratios. You just got to make sure you can identify your sides and set it up and do some basic algebra. So let me know if you have any questions as you do your work.